on strategies and instructions for students with numeracy difficulties. Before we begin, take note of the following reminders. Make sure you are registered to the webinar to have your e-certificate of participation. Visit certificate.vibalgroup.com to generate your proof of attendance. Place your questions on the comment box allotted during the session and they will be addressed by our speaker later on. Share the video using hashtag LearnAsOnePH as our official hashtag to our VIBAL webinars. Experience learning, Kavibal. And now, to proceed with our webinar this afternoon, it is my pleasure to introduce to you our distinguished speaker today. Our speaker today is a proud alumna of Don Honorio Ventura Technological State University with a degree of Doctor of Education, Don Honorio Ventura Technological State University Masters in Educational Management, Guagua National College's baccalaureate degree, St. Agustin, Florida Blanca for elementary and secondary education. She is a certified DepEd resource speaker, a career executive service examination passer, career executive service board in the Philippines. She is also the international coordinator chair for Philippine delegates since 2018 to present, representing in the Hong Kong International Mathematics Olympiad, Thailand International Mathematics Olympiad, Big Bay Olympiad in China, and World Mathematics Olympiad in Japan. She is also the current advisor and consultant of the Mathematics Association of the Philippines Pampanga chapter. She is a peer reviewer for Asian researches since 2018 up to now in the Asian Scholar Network's Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. She is the Graduate Studies Research Professor and Advisor in the Graduate Studies Alumni President in Don Honorio Ventura State University. She is a Senior Education Program Specialist in Planning and Research in DepEd Schools Division of Pampanga. And lastly, but not the least, she is the current Education Program Supervisor of the Mathematics Department in the DepEd Schools Division of Pampanga. Ladies and gentlemen, let us welcome Miss Jane Pangilinan Valencia.
Hello there. Hello, good afternoon. Thank you very much for introducing me to our audience. Am I being heard loud and clear?
Yes po, ma'am.
Thank you very much. So allow me to start with my presentation by sharing this slide deck that I have prepared for the VIBAL viewers and attenders of this webinar. Thank you very much also VIBAL for having me. It's a pleasure to share what I know and understand about specifically about numeracy. And so this is the presentation that I prepared for you, and it's called from what you heard. The title of this session is actually Strategies and Instruction for Students with Numeracy Difficulties. Thank you very much for this is very highly acknowledged issues and concern in terms of the Department of Education when we battle with difficulties, especially in literacy and numeracy. But upon contemplating how I am going to share information to all our viewers and attendees of this webinar, I am thinking these strategies and instructions that are really indeed needed for us to really be equipped upon before will be given enough understanding of what instructional strategies will work for our learners with numeracy difficulty. We might as well rethink what do we refer to when we talk about numeracy difficulties. And so allow me to share with you the goals of this session. That after this session, we may be equipped, okay, of an ample understanding of an identification of the different numeracy difficulties, and determine reasons why such difficulties exist. Also, after the session, I am hoping as well that we're going to distinguish instructional strategies that conquer numeracy difficulties. But again, as a waiver, there's no one best strategy in terms of instruction in order for us to make learning happen. Okay, there are a series of factors, there are varied influences that really beset teaching and learning instruction. But talking about numeracy, this is really a feel good session because I really want to share information in terms of how we really address numeracy, how we really look into numeracy, and how do we practice teaching underscoring numeracy. When we talk about numeracy, what comes into your mind? Okay, a lot of teachers ask me, ma'am, how can we improve numeracy? Ma'am, how can we battle against numeracy difficulties? Ma'am, what is the best way, no, to overcome the learning difficulties in terms of numeracy? Let us first understand all the mechanism, all the underlying factors, no, that really come into contact with what we really want to achieve at the end of the day. So when we talk about numeracy, these can be described as the knowledge, the skills, and behaviors that allow us to use mathematics in a range of everyday contexts, including studies, the workplace, and our personal lives. When we talk about numeracy, of course, we talk about math, but how do we distinguish the things that separate numeracy and math? Math is a concept. Math is a learning adventure. But when we talk about numeracy, numeracy is applied. Numeracy is actually gaining the confidence and competence in applying numbers for our participation in what we call society. And of course, our understanding of the world. We use numeracy every day in all areas of our lives. Just like when we say math pervades life, that is also written in our K to 12 DepEd curriculum. Life decisions are so often based on numerical information. And if our students will not acquire these essential knowledge, skills, and attitudes towards number applications, then of course this may cause a roadblock for achieving their goals and aspirations. And you know, even when I was a child, when I was just a student, when I was just a teacher, the question is how? How do we make learners acquire this particular attribute? Actually, we all know in 2019, last year, we are daunted by an issue in terms of quality of learning due to an international assessment result. And that is what you see in front of you, the 2018 PISA result, wherein Philippines rank lowest in reading. Filipino children are last in reading and second to the last in maths and science out of the 79 countries. And because of this, last year, the country's education system is concluded to be in crisis. And I believe you are all aware of it. Everybody in the education system is aware of it. Actually, if you can see the table of the PISA 2018 results, wherein reading, mathematics, and science are the areas where our 15-year-old children were tested. Some 15-year-old children were tested. It appeared that Chinese students scored overall highest in terms of the result. Reading 555, maths 591, science 590. Followed by Singapore, wherein their reading score is 549, maths is 569, and science is 551. Now, 78 places away, Filipino pupils lag the lowest score in the blue one, the reading, where we scored 340 and only edge out to the Dominican Republic in maths by 325, no, by 353 to 325, and science by 357 to 336. Now, why is that? We might be asking, why is that? And as early as last year, we, as supervisors, as teachers, as school principals, we're informed that the next PISA would be about maths and science, and that really would give us an urgency to do something about this. Now, let us try to analyze the results, because the PISA maths and science tests are based on English reading comprehension. Of course, we know for a fact that we have issues in this one. The Filipino students lack reading proficiency. This lacking in reading proficiency pulled down their scores. Even one journalist, and at the same time an educator, he's a professor, Mr. Estanislao Albano. He himself commented that the debacle is about reading proficiency, not only because of the reading part of the test, but because one has to comprehend the questions in maths and science to answer correctly. And probably that is the main reason why we lag behind this test. Another is it's computerized. Okay, and our Filipino children who took the test were randomly selected. Okay, but nonetheless, this goes down to saying that we really need to check on how we provide learning to our students. Just look at this comic strip. I like this comic strip that I always include it into my sessions, into my seminars. No, just think about this comic strip. Read it. What does it say? I said, this little boy here said, I thought Stripe how to whistle. But the other boy said, I don't hear him whistling. And then the boy responded, I said, I taught him. I didn't say he learned it. Okay? This is this is a clear manifestation of what is really happening in some schools. No, let's face it, in our country. This has been, since time immemorial, a particular ordeal in education. Not only in our country, but of most, if not all, in the entire world. And while we, the thinkers and movers of our education, all who works under the teaching learning system, from the national down to the regions, down to the divisions, to school, whether public or private learning institutions, whether you are a supervisor, a school principal, or a teacher, we think really of our strategic direction to actually improve on how we practice teaching and how we make our learners acquire the necessary competence in all of these levels of learning. However, while we are at that position, okay, we are now again astounded with this health crisis brought about by the COVID-19 pandemic. Diba? And so another issue, another dilemma had arisen. And because of this, there seems to be a cloud, okay, in our minds. We are clouded with a question. What now for our children's education? What are we going to do? We are given the options and paved with solutions that despite the health crisis, our secretary, our DepEd secretary said, education cannot wait. Okay, that gives rise to what we call the battle cry, sulong edukalidad. Okay, we are given options to provide solutions despite the health crisis. Education cannot wait. It must go. go on, it must continue. Because learning does not recognize the word stop. Even if you are an adult, you are a toddler, you are a school age child, learning does not stop. We are course to identify avenues and recognize the peculiarity of the situation and plan the delivery of education, which gave rise, of course, to the term education in the new normal. A while back, I saw in the ads it's a hybrid education. It's a better normal education. It's something new. It's something that is providing the new now. Okay, wherein remote learning in a form of learning delivery modalities were introduced. And I'm very much pretty sure that in the last 3 to 4 months, you have been attending series of webinars familiarizing it. And yes, being a proactive, I am one with DepEd that it will work. Yes, we may encounter flaws, but we'll work on it. However, some reactive would comment, kung sa actual classroom learning instruction nga, may mga batang di makakuha ng lesson. Sa remote learning pa kaya? No? We are introduced with the term flipped classroom, blended learning, online distance learning, modular learning. In the past few years, yes, we hear about this through research. We are open, okay, to this learning delivery modalities. But when it came, so many questions, so many doubts, so many hesitations have flourished. Okay, but instead of just clamoring, why don't we start contemplating? Because whether in school or out of the school premises, students can learn so long as we pave the way for it to happen. And in terms of this situation that we are having right now, in terms of the kind of ordeal that we are experiencing right now, and everybody at that time, starting from March, has paused for a while, okay, and think and be able to identify how are we going to continue with the basic need of our children in terms of education, because it's a basic need. I think what we have to do is go back to the basics. But in going back to the basics, okay, we have things to do before we act. Okay, when we go back to the basics, we have to know where to start. And so the first thing that we have to do is we have to assess. We need to determine markers on where to start and how to start. And so we need to understand where we are in connection to where our learners are as well in terms of knowledge, skills, and attitudes. How we teach our students in accordance to how learners learn. That is what we have to assess. And by doing this, we can plan for the methods, the approaches, and strategies that we find appropriate and adequately designed solely for a particular learning styles. Methods are formed by principles and pedagogies. They are time-tested methodology in terms of teaching, as well as the old and the new approaches in teaching. We have very wide options in terms of approaches in teaching. And in terms of strategies, these are ways or steps on how we toggle the different processes in order for our learners to learn. And these must be designed carefully. These must be planned, okay, comprehensively for a particular learning style. Again, we always hear the word no one size fits all. So everything must be differentiated. Everything must be varied depending on the needs of our learners. we need to start from where they are. We need to understand their background, understanding, and prior knowledge in order for us to really check on what are the methods, the approaches, and strategies that we're going to employ, we think would be effective when we do teaching and learning instruction. By doing that, it is only then that we can act for how best we can influence students to gain our goals towards what we call the learning progress. Now, again, going back to that basics, what are the two most prominent skills that most of our learners are diagnosed to have learning issues? Okay, I hope I can hear you, but I'm trying to have my monologue here. Yes, you are all correct when we say these two skills are very prominent in terms of researches, in terms of planning, action planning, needs assessment. These two skills of our learners are very vital indeed, that they really need to be addressed. And numeracy and literacy are those two skills. When we talk about numeracy and literacy, they go together. You cannot address numeracy difficulties unless you address literacy difficulties as well, because they go together. It's not possible that you can address numeracy difficulty without looking into their literacy level. So not because these are issues, not because our teachers lack the ability to perform their duties and responsibilities to teach, but because individual learners, of course, have individual needs. Individual learners, of course, have individual styles. And it's also skill among teachers to recognize such differences. And of course, not being able to do so may result actually to learning disabilities or learning disadvantages. Understanding the reasons why a student may be experiencing difficulties while learning is an important first step to help them better access across the curriculum. Sabi ko nga po sa mga teachers, um, if you're going to address the numeracy difficulties in a 1 year period of time, then okay, you are adding up to the misfortunes of our learners. Why? Because they are learners at the same time. They are students at the same time. They are going to school and battling around the K to 12 curriculum at their grade level. And yet they are groping to learn about numeracy. And if you're going to provide intervention in a whole school year round, then you're not making or helping them to progress. Okay, but you're just adding up to all their anxiety. Okay, so for us to really think about instructional strategies, for us to really design what is the best strategic intervention for our learners with numeracy and literacy difficulties, we have to identify what do we talk about when we what do we mean when we talk about numeracy difficulties and literacy difficulties. Okay, so for us to really assess these particular numeracy and literacy difficulties, we have to check these pairing words, difficulty and disability. I added disability because there is a silver lining, according to Catriona Gray. There is a silver lining that separates difficulty and disability, but we don't really look into what we call disability because it is subsumed with the term difficulty. Okay, there's no easy method for identifying students with learning difficulty in numeracy. And in literacy, the fact that a child cannot read has a difficulty in reading. The child that cannot really pronounce letters is diagnosed to have disability in reading, especially when this student is in advance of age, okay, in terms of age level. There's no easy method now in numeracy in order for us to identify what really, okay, is the disability behind, what makes him disadvantaged in terms of learning maths. Nor is there a one size fits all approach to providing support to what we call students' needs. What we have to do is, for us to understand each learner's needs in terms of critical determinants in order for us to design appropriate strategic instructions and different kinds of supports that they might be requiring. And so, in order for us to really think of the better idea to identify such numeracy difficulties or disabilities, we might as well discuss further what are these. Okay, in terms of disability, there are these two prominent terms that come across when talking about numeracy disability. Okay, the first one is what we call dyslexia, and this is literacy connected. Okay, and then the other one is dyscalculia. Okay, what are these two numeracy disability that we often hear when we talk about numeracy difficulty? Okay. In terms of numeracy difficulty, on the other hand, we have what we call delay in acquisition of basic number concepts. And these are not because a child have this what we call dyscalculia or dyslexia, but probably there are reasons behind this difficulty. They may be student related factors or social and or environmental factors. And of course, one other thing that could cause this one might be mathematical anxiety. Okay? These are terms that really linger around when we talk about numeracy difficulty or disability. But let's dig deeper. When we talk about numeracy disability, we talk about dyslexia. What is dyslexia? Dyslexia is a learning disorder that involves reading difficulty due to due to problems identifying speech sounds and how they relate to letters and words. In short, our students have difficulty in decoding words or phrases or fragments or even syllables. It's because of this disability, which is termed as dyslexia. On the other hand, we have what we call dyscalculia. Dyscalculia is regarded as a specific learning disability resulting from differences in the brain that affects the typical acquisition of numerical skills. That's according to Butterworth, a famous researcher in math, where he wrote it in 2019. So let's dig deeper. In the Philippines, no, it's around 8%. Okay, actually, there's only 8% of noted, okay, rates of prevalence in terms of dyscalculia. Probably because they are just the ones diagnosed. Okay, sometimes kasi when we talk about numeracy difficulty, it's already the difficulty, but not really pointing out, yeah, these students have what we call dyscalculia. When we talk about dyscalculia, even if the child has already reached the age, the learning age on where he's able to supposedly master and acquire the automaticity in just the just the basic four fundamental operations, when he was not able to master that at a specific age level, then we might be rethinking this student might have this kind of learning disability. Okay, but in terms of clinical testing, they are not being tested. What we could just do is to assume that these children have this kind of disability because they have trouble performing the essential automaticity in terms of the basics in numeracy or math. Okay, but um, in terms of worldwide understanding, when we talk about dyscalculia, it always enter into the different realm in terms of difficulty. Okay, when our children have difficulty and in number sense in looking into the different sizes and shapes and patterns and measurement, and even have fear of the x and y's, then we already assume that they are experiencing dyscalculia, and we can assume that because these are probably the symptoms, okay, why our students have difficulty in terms of numeracy, and probably they have this kind of disability. But um, research and science says dyscalculia and dyslexia are treated with a good nature of teaching and learning experience, treated in such a way that a teacher can provide, no, the avenue for our learners to really acquire the necessary understanding, the necessary knowledge, skills, and attitudes towards literacy and numeracy. Okay. Now, in association with numeracy difficulties, learning difficulty, as we say, is only an umbrella term to describe students who are experiencing difficulty with learning because of variety of reasons. And what are those reasons? They have this what we call delay in acquisition of basic number concepts because of student related factors. And what are these student related factors? This might be because of chronic absenteeism. And this is very, very rampant in public education. I don't know about the private education system if they are also experiencing chronic absenteeism, but in public schools, this is very rampant. And this could hamper numeracy acquisition. Okay? Another is sensory impairments. Sometimes we disregard because we do not have that clinical testing in terms of if our students really know uh, know if our students have difficulty in reading because they have poor eyesight. Maybe our students have difficulty in understanding the lesson because they have poor audiovisual impairment, something like that. Okay, these are issues that are student related factors. Okay, and these are things that we need to look into. Okay, delayed acquisition of language. Okay, but it's normal. Some students really, because of social environment as well, and parental upbringing, some of our students really do not like to speak because it's the way they are in their homes, and so probably this is the reason. Okay, they were not able to develop language at an early age, and that this might be also a reason for our students to have this what we call learning difficulty. And then social emotional difficulties, okay, we know that. And then specific cognitive problems, for example, issues with working memory and overlap with a literacy learning difficulty. So these are student related factors that could be linked into numeracy difficulty. Another is what we call social and or environmental factors. So and what are these? These may be because of limited early language and literary exposure, just like what I have mentioned a while back in terms of parental and environmental um, influences. Okay, we have low socioeconomic status. We have family history of learning disabilities. We have disrupted learning, for example, school refusal. If English is not a student's first language or the primary language spoken at home, this may contribute to initial difficulties while the child masters the language. This is also an issue in terms of having um, our mother tongue based instructions in grades 1 to 3 for mathematics, and then transitioning to English language instruction um, at grade 4 level up to junior and senior high school in terms of learning math. This has been research based issues for quite some time, and these also were proven, no, adding up to issues in learning difficulties and numeracy difficulties at that. Okay, so when we talk about mathematics anxiety naman is not really a learning difficulty for those who are poor in math or cannot do maths. Okay, even those who are good at math, and even those who have high IQ in terms of mathematics, they are also experiencing mathematics anxiety. Okay, when we talk about mathematics anxiety, this has been defined as feelings of tension and anxiety that interfere with the manipulation of numbers and the solving of mathematical problems in a wide variety of ordinary life and academic situations. Math anxiety can cause one to forget and lose one's self-confidence. In terms of mathematics anxiety, these are triggered by socio-environmental context. These are also triggered by overexcitement, emotions, fear, things like that, or even stress. Stress can add up to mathematics anxiety. So it's very important that classroom teachers understand also the way our students behave, okay, in terms on how they deal with their peers, how they deal with the teacher themselves, and how they interact with the environment around them. This could cause our learners to have mathematics anxiety. Sabi nga, di ba, a teacher is a big factor in terms of mathematics learning. Pag sinabi nilang terror si teacher sa math, nauuna yung fear. Kaya as they go along with the teaching learning instruction, these children tend to dislike math. Why? Because of the teacher factor. Or probably because of too many assignments or too many activities. And then our students are lagging behind understanding every learning competency. And that triggers mathematics anxiety. These are things that really can make or break our students in acquiring numeracy. Okay, so these are some of the learning difficulties that I believe all of us as teachers, all of us experience already. And I believe that these issues and concerns are not new to us anymore. These things, or the things that we've been battling before. So it's important for us to understand how do we best identify these numeracy difficulties at the onset. Kailangan agad natin alam agad natin na naiintindihan. Even at the early stage, alam na natin na ang mga estudyante to, they really need attention. Or we really need to focus on them, or we really need to give extra learning instruction for them. These are essential in terms of observing, okay, at the onset, how our children learn, how our children decipher, okay, the necessary understanding that they need to acquire. Kailangan at the onset nakikita na natin yon. And some psychologists, no, and even psychiatrists have markers in order for us to really identify at an early age of whether our learners have numeracy difficulties. Okay? There is a way for our teachers to understand, okay, and diagnose, no, even if they are not psychiatrists and psychologists, they can be able to identify who among our students at an early age is having a learning difficulty in terms of numeracy. According to science, or according to research that I've read, uh, ages 2 to 4 is the height of curiosity among our learners. And at this age, our learners, our children, our students are best at getting information and mastering information. Okay, 2 to 4 years old. Okay? They really would like, they are gregarious to to understand the world around them. And that's math and science. Okay. However, the age of 5 to 12, which is a growing age, a fundamental age, a foundational, okay, stage, where it's really where we have our primary and intermediate levels in education. These are the time that our learners struggle, okay, in learning, because they are now being introduced to environmental barriers or factors that might hamper, no, the continuity of the learning process. So in between 5 to 12, there might be factors, no, that lead them away to the progression of learning. And so it's very important for us teachers to identify what we call the markers that can help us, no, understand the core number ability of our learners. When we say these are markers that can help us to identify students' core number ability, it might be figuring out their number ability or disability. And one way to there are two markers, there are two ways even psychologists and expert teachers would do in order to diagnose whether our students have learning difficulties in terms of math or numeracy or literacy. So in math, this the one is what they call subitizing. Okay, what we mean when we say subitizing? Okay, subitizing is the ability to rapidly enumerate small sets of objects at a glance without explicitly counting. Okay, when our learners, when faced with the figures or an illustration or an abstract, and they can be able to pinpoint how many are there in the sets, then they have a very strong core number ability. But if they can't, then it's otherwise. Testing students' subitizing skills can help identify numeracy learning difficulties. Typically, when a learner is presented with small sets of objects, basically in early growing years, like primary age level, when they are presented with objects up to 5, and students can quickly and accurately name the number of objects in a set without needing to count them individually, then they have good number ability. But a student with difficulties or a students with dyscalculia, however, will not be able to do this quickly. What do they do? They may need to count each object individually. And sometimes, sometimes saying the numbers aloud, you can hear them uh, pointing to the object or to the figure and say 1, 2, 3 while they are counting. They are really, really saying it aloud. Okay, since this ability, subitizing is an ability to understand symbolic numbers. This is linked to understanding um, sets. Okay, or later on, when there are students who have subitizing difficulty, they will tend to struggle in situations where they are required to apply this type of understanding, especially in patterns and sequences. Subitizing also um, impacts a student's ability to effectively compute answers to problems and use this as in a problem solving strategies. Because students who lack typical subitizing abilities are at a distinct disadvantage mathematically per se. Their acquisition of numerical abilities could tend to be inhibited. This then would affect their acquisition in terms of more complex mathematics concepts. So at an early stage, it's vital whether you are a teacher or a parent or a caregiver or a sibling, Okay, you do not need an expert to teach this, especially in this time of the health crisis that our students are learning at home, and we are providing them self-learning modules or self-learning kits, and they need the assistance to really identify fundamental skills that they need to develop. Okay, in terms of online learning, whether it be synchronous or asynchronous, we must really identify and assess our students in terms of the subitizing skill. Are they able to rapidly enumerate small sets of objects at a glance without explicitly counting them, even in a group of fives? Okay, 5 frames or frames of tens. Okay, these are easy ways for us to really attend, okay, whether or not our students are having difficulty at an early age. Why do I say at an early age? Because um, when we want to make our learners overcome numeracy difficulties, this must be done at an early age, because when it's done and when it's intervened in their secondary level, they have already missed a lot in terms of acquisition of knowledge skills. And of course, their attitude is affected towards math. And so that come that that issue comes across, hating math. That's why they hate math. That's why they don't find it enjoyable. That's why they skip math. Okay, that's why they don't want to be linked with math. Okay, because of those issues. And so as early on their learning age level, these must be diagnosed already, this must be addressed already, these must be assessed already. The next marker is what we call comparing approximate magnitudes. Okay, what do we mean when we say comparing approximate magnitude? When we say comparing approximate magnitude, this is the ability to efficiently compare the approximate sizes of quantities. This is also an indicator of numerical ability and can help teachers identify students who may have learning difficulty in numeracy. And this can be checked at an early age, whether even of as our learners are in their toddler's age, or even if they are um, not yet entering the formal schooling or formal instruction, you can actually see the manifestation of numeracy difficulties when they don't know how to check on whether which is larger, which is more, which is less, okay, which is longer, which is shorter, things on that magnitude. Okay, teachers, us teachers can check this ability by assessing the speed and accuracy with which students identify the relative magnitude of two numerical values. For example, which quantity or which number is larger or smaller, shorter. Okay, a student would be asked, okay, if you are a teacher, you need to ask students to identify in an array with the most, okay, figures, to identify what you want them to pinpoint, like which is the largest, which is the smallest, because learners with learning or numeracy difficulty um, would lag behind this simple test, especially when they are having dyscalculia, especially when they are experiencing social related factors, or like, and then student related factors, like they have impairment in terms of sensory functions. Okay, you can easily identify and be able to address, okay, as early on in their learning age level. As with subitizing, their ability to compare approximate magnitude of quantities is a strong predictor of mathematics ability or mathematical ability. Um, in terms of core number ability, this ability to quickly and efficiently compare the relative magnitude of numbers or quantities, these are what we call conceptual competence associated with estimation, um, ability to approximate answers in the absence of an exact answer. So, in turn, mathematical problems can tend to be solved procedurally, relying solely on these processes. Okay, so these are markers on how we can test learning difficulties or even disabilities of our learners in terms of not only numeracy, but of course also of literacy, because if they are not able to read and recognize shapes, size, this also has something to do with comprehension. This also has something to do with reading, and so this goes together. Literacy and numeracy difficulties go together, and so in order for you to address one, you have to also address the other. And so our instruction must be based on our assessment, whether or not, okay, our children who we are to teach or provide the learning competencies or this meeting towards the standards or performance that we owe them to have. Before we can do that, we must be able to assess, are they really at their age level, appropriate age level, having already the ability that they need in terms of these two skills in learning. If not, then there's a time for us to plan. Okay, after assess, we have to plan. Okay, and then what do we plan? We plan for strategies and instructions fit for students with this numeracy difficulties. So as I said before, there's no one size fits all. Okay, there's I think there's or I can say that there's no approach, okay, supporting to students literacy and numeracy difficulties that is good for everybody in one class. Okay, because even in the face-to-face teaching and learning classroom, if they are heterogeneously grouped, okay, I could strongly say, based on observation, that in every group of 35, there are 5 more or less who have this either literacy or numeracy difficulty. And understanding each student's individual learning needs is critical in order for us to determine appropriate strategies, or even we call them sometimes as interventions. And students with different kinds of these difficulties, of course, require different kinds of learning support. And when we talk about learning support, we are not just talking about teachers. We are talking about school leaders. We are talking about community. It takes a village to educate a child. We are talking about the parents and the siblings. We are talking about the environment that sets in to them. Okay? In this time of pandemic, in this time of uncertainty, we are now living in the VUCAD world. This is the reality of the VUCAD world. The vulnerability, the uncertainty, the complexity and ambiguity, and now the disruptive world that we are living right now. We are not assured of what's to come. Okay, we don't even have the idea of whether when this struggle on health crisis would stop. Actually, it's accelerating. Okay, numbers are accelerating in terms of those afflicted. And what do? We have to continue educating our children. And when we do educate our children, we do not settle for something that is less. Even at the four walls of our class homes, not classrooms, but homes, okay, we devise parameters in order for our learners to really find their way towards learning. And as teachers, As we say, we do not lack. We do not lack the competence. We do not lack the knowledge, the experience as well in teaching our learners. We just have to check on what we do right now, or we just have to check whether this application, or this strategy that we're having right now is really the one fit for this this student or this child. And so it would be requiring us to have our flashback. Okay, flashback in the sense that you have to think back. How are you taught math when you are still in your elementary grades? Because we are toggling towards numeracy. And so when you are in elementary, how were you taught with math? I believe that during those times, okay, there are those of us who were inspired by our math teachers. But then again, there are others who were so scared with the math teachers that they tend to hate math. Okay? And in teaching math right now as teachers, how do you usually present a lesson? What materials or tools do you use? What learning experience do you provide your learners for them to understand math concepts and skills effectively? Of course, different folks have different strokes, but it's really a high check whether those strokes that you are striking really hit the target. Okay, these are things that we have to contemplate, to flush it back amongst us as educators. And so I provide different strategies. Again, I repeat, there's no one best strategy, but what I could give you is based on observation and research. These are things that are found effective, and it might work on a specific child, but not necessarily to all children. It might work for your class right now, whether online or offline, but it may not. So really, you really have to assess and analyze while planning. Okay, we're in the set of planning. That's why I present you different strategies and instruction. Wherein, let me just go back to this contemplation, where I am reminded of a famous quote that says, "If you teach children today the way you were taught yesterday, you are robbing them of their tomorrow." Okay, I just forgot who said that, but you know, times have changed. We are faced and feeling at present what we call the uncertainties of this world. We are like well of waters where we fill up learners quench for learning. But times have changed. Yes, we are candles and we make our lights be consumed to lighten the path of our learners towards learning. But times have changed. It's time to go by their rules, get a revamp, and recharge. Rethink on how we can best resurface. We need to act and think the way our Generation Z are behaving right now or acting right now, because you cannot reprimand them. There's a law that says they are not to be reprimanded. They have to be taken care of. They have to be nourished the way they are brought up. And so we go by their flow, but we strategically go by their flow. And these are some ways that I think would help us identify possible ways on how we can strategize instruction among specifically learners with numeracy difficulties. Okay, so I'd use numeracy as an acronym. Okay, wherein I said for N, it is niching with number talks. For U, upscaling of learners' understanding. M is modeling with guided instruction. E, exploring opportunities for practice. R, rebooting from a multitude of sensory stimulation. A is activating the levels of representation of knowledge. C, creating adaptive instruction, and Y is yielding a math learning progress portfolio. Again, these are not new to you. These are already time-tested strategies, which I only gave new phrases, new names. But when you go back, the methods, the approaches are still sinking in. Okay, so let's start. Start with niching with number talks. Okay, what do we refer with when we say niching with number talks? Number talks provide opportunities to build students what we call numbers and number sense. Okay, it's part of the content areas, numbers and number sense, wherein you provide our students short 5 to 15 minutes conversation about computation problems that strengthen students' accuracy, efficiency, and flexibility with mental computation as early at as their primary age level. Okay. In a normal teaching and learning instruction, I often find our teachers during observation that they allot 5 minutes for motivation and ask questions that trigger interest. Okay, and then later on, present the lesson and then go on with the discussion, which is a direct instruction. But today, you cannot go by providing instruction by direct instruction, or else your students get bored. So what do you do? With that 5 minute motivation, with that 5 minute igniting of interest, you make that as really the edge on how you would flow the discussion among our learners. It's like propping up. We take that as a primer, take that as a premiere, in order for our learners to really go on igniting their interest towards math, and let it flow as a conversation on their part, not on your part as a teacher, but on their part. Like just presenting this figure, this pattern, and say, let's talk about this, and make them provide information, provide conclusions about this just by presenting the figure. Even when you want to present a question or a problem situation, where you say, in a farm there are some goats and some chickens. These are my favorite open-ended questions. Paul counted 45 heads while Julie counted 150 legs. How many goats and how many chickens are there? Okay, and then they would raise several questions. They could, in a synchronous online learning, they could talk, they can break out and talk about this. In asynchronous, you can provide support questions for the students to really think hard. This is one way for our learners to really be in charge and be flexible in thinking for a possible solution. Okay, this is what we call creative mathematics. And just niche that number talk. Do not provide a very templated way of discussing the lesson, but instead flow with what we call the number talks. And this must be practiced every day, not just by one time, but every day when you are doing your math class, or when you are engaging your students towards teaching and learning instruction. There are actually 5 components to conducting a number talk. You have to provide a culture which establishes ideas that are accepted and students' response are respected. Communication provides students with opportunities to share their strategies and justify their thinking. The teacher's role is to provide the problem, give wait time, record answers, and facilitate the discussion. You're just the secretary. Students' mental computation encourages them to build member or number relationships and not just rely on memorized procedures. I often say that with our teachers, do not provide memorized procedures to our learners. Problems are chosen purposefully to give students practice with specific mental computation strategies. We really would like our students to gain that automaticity in terms of numeracy, not being provided with procedural techniques. Okay. The next is what we call the U in numeracy, which is upscaling of learners' understanding. And I often inform our teachers the difference between instrumental understanding and relational understanding. Instrumental understanding is when pupils are provided or students are provided with rules. Okay, and they begin to be informed about those rules, know those rules, but without reason. But when we talk about relational understanding, pupils or our students not only know the rules but can explain why they work. Meaning to say, you don't have to provide facts, but you have to provide practical applications of facts. Okay? This is an example of that. Let's talk about this. The other example on the left shows instrumental understanding, while this on your right, use the drawings to add. This is what an example of relational understanding. They begin to realize, okay, the concept into a real life situation, or being able to acknowledge that there's a reason for a certain equation. Okay. The letter M in numeracy is modeling and guided instruction. This this does not go out of style. When we say modeling, it's mathematics is always about modeling. Mathematics manipulatives provide multiple representations which helps to build understanding. There is no need for formal symbolism yet if we are dealing especially with students with learning difficulties. Excuse me. We provide our students with meaningful story problems. It may be written or read orally to provide the background for students to make sense of computation ideas. As long as manipulative materials are available, children will also be encouraged to draw pictures of their own, use an open number line, or talk about what they do to solve a problem. And of course, being so that we are really making them interested into numbers, problem solving need not so difficult. Okay, but of course, when we say modeling, you have to explicitly show how it is done and then make the child or the student experience. That is what we call guided instruction. Okay, this is one example. Nina has 4 red buttons and 12 blue buttons. Her friend Leia said that the ratio of the number of red buttons to the number of blue buttons is 1:3. But another friend, Anne, said that it is 2:6. Which of them is correct and why? You don't have to make them right, but you just have to make them engage into the situation insofar as opening the discussion and giving them information that could lead, could best lead them to understanding the concept. Okay? So after modeling and guiding and modeling and giving guided instruction, we now explore opportunities for practice. When we explore opportunities for practice, we provide them a array of learning experience. Practice refers to whether given online or offline, each addressing the same basic ideas. They provide mastery and to make learning more permanent. Okay, these are several opportunities for practice. Okay, you can give them games, puzzles and riddles, surprises, novel formats, use of calculators is possible, personal computers, internet connection, and novel algorithms. In terms of the R in numeracy, you have to have the rebooting from a multitude of sensory stimulation or stimulants. Contrary to popular opinion, uh, that students with attention deficits cannot attend to things. Students with true attention deficits actually attend to too much, a multitude of sensory stimulation that catches their attention easily. They are easily distracted, especially in a face-to-face class. No, when you are inside the classroom, those who have difficulties in maths and numeracy are the ones who tend to look outside the classroom when someone is passing by, when there is a noise. No, they are easily distracted. But actually, they're the ones who are really into it because they're trying to decipher what the teacher is teaching. But they're easily distracted. So, due to this inability to filter out distractions, okay, students might miss important information presented in class. So, they tend to focus on unimportant events taking place during class. And this particular modality, learning delivery modality, where we provide online learning, whether synchronous or asynchronous, this distance modular learning approach can give us really an opportunity to differentiate instruction and provide more concentration on those students who really need more attention. And let us look at this as an opportunity for our students to really be given that enough instruction that they need. Okay, strategize the instruction in so far as connecting it with the learning delivery modality that the children or you as a teacher are in context with. Okay, and rebooting from a multitude of sensory stimulation, I've said that can make our students miss important information presented or focus on unimportant events taking place during instruction. So what do? We teach procedures after concepts. Okay? We make them make sense of what they learn rather than memorize facts and equations. Okay? In short, practicality versus perception. Okay? Present activities actually that ignite learners' interest. The A in the numeracy is activating the levels of representation of knowledge. I included this because this is very important and this has already been practiced by our teachers, and this does not go out of style. This is really the process in math. Okay? You have to provide concrete or inactive hands-on method of learning using physical objects. And then after providing physical objects, you provide pictorial, which are iconic, which involves images or other visuals to represent the concrete enacted in the first stage. And then go by what we call the symbolic or abstract. This involves using words, numerals, and other symbols to represent ideas, objects, and action. This is the relationship between concrete, iconic, and symbolic, and then going back to concrete again in terms of the mathematics teaching and learning instruction. This does not go out of style. This must be incorporated in your day-to-day instruction to your learners, whether or not they have numeracy difficulties. But when our students are going to have these numeracy difficulties, this is the most appropriate way on presenting the lesson. And this is the most adequate, okay, method on how you can activate our learners' interest towards math. Okay? And the C in the numeracy strategies is that we have also to create adaptive instruction. When we say creating an adaptive process, learning is an active process, and this is going through the different stages in the developmental process of learning. So in order for us to make our learners progress, we must lead them towards that direction, towards that path. Okay, so what do we provide them? without visual, auditory, kinesthetic, or tactile cueing, and supports explicitly tied to concepts, students may have difficulty communicating their mathematical understanding. So it's always linking it to something, real life situations, real things, um, providing them the scenario, the platform, the approaches, gamification, experiential understanding. So those things really you juggle all methodologies, approaches, and equip it in your strategy, and provide them with the tasks and activities that is needed. Then you have a plan, you have a program to actualize. Okay, but of course you have to go back to what the resources that are needed. You have to have visual organizers and multiple opportunities to represent problems which help them with their memory deficits. Templates aid students in remembering steps to algorithms. But you do not just rely on templates, but because most of our teachers rely on templates, rely on steps and processes and rules. These are instrumental understanding. You have to go conceptual understanding first, then move to instrumental when they are already have what we call mastery of learning. Okay, and so explicitly teach students how to highlight important information in a problem. Most of the time during the old days, our teachers provide keywords like what is left, okay, all together, so something like that. Do not teach keywords. If meaning and understanding is what you are, okay, after teaching keywords just has students looking for the words and finding the numbers. Okay, this might confuse our learners. Example is this one. All together, there are 46 students in fourth grade. 29 of them are girls and the rest are boys. How many boys are there in fourth grade? Okay, this is an example of providing keywords. Okay, so as much as possible, this has gone out of style, and make as much as possible we provide our learners with open-ended problem situations. And finally, the why in the numeracy strategies of instruction is we have to yield the math learning progress portfolio because we have to track our learners' progress. We have to identify the parameters where they lag behind, or the parameters they're interested into, or the mechanisms that work best for them. These are things that you need to know, to journal about as teacher and them as your learners. Make older students aware of places where they frequently make errors. Remind them with cards so they check to see that they haven't made this again. Okay. I have a typographical error at the bottom part because I duplicate this slide. But then again, it just goes to say that the why is for you to really provide um, constant feedback. Um, that is never out of style. Every day you have to track learners' progress. Feedback is a very important um, aspect of that. Okay, and with feedback comes assessment. Of course, assessment is all throughout the teaching and learning instruction and assessment goes together, even at the beginning, during, and after the teaching and learning instruction. Have to have what we call the assessment part, and by this assessment then you can be able to assure yourself as a teacher and the students as the learner if there's what we call the progress. Okay, so those are strategies in teaching that I really contemplated by researching and based on my observations with my responsibility in providing technical assistance to teachers and school principals in the turf of mathematics. And of course, also um, as part of my numerous studies about mathematics. And so, again, these are some strategies that can help us um, plan for the assessed learning difficulties of our learners before acting for a series of programs, interventions, project all numerates, strategic interventions in order for our children to learn best that they can in this time of pandemic. So these strategies, nurturing with number talks, upscaling of learners' understanding, modeling with guided instruction, exploring opportunities for practice, rebooting from a multitude of sensory stimulation, activating the levels of representation of knowledge, creating adaptive instruction, and yielding a math learning progress portfolio. I think these are somehow, okay, may be effective for a particular student with a particular learning difficulties. And so I am really gregarious in have this adrenaline to really share more about this with different in different contexts and in different parameters. But then again, with this kind of time that we are having, I am really pretty sure that you can navigate on these strategies and further your studies about this so that you can better understand and picture the process so that you can include them in your plans and programs and projects once you decide on what best strategy of instruction that may help our learners with literacy and numeracy difficulty conquer their situation. And so, Olivia, not only does sound strategy and instruction enable students with specific learning difficulties to, but to develop foundational understandings, they also train students' self-regulation and metacognition skills that will be needed to gain master through, of course, consistency. Okay, with that, thank you very much. And don't forget to go back to basics. Okay, and assess, plan, and later on, act. Thank you very much, Paul.
Thank you very much for that information, ma'am. I'm sure everybody has learned a lot. Now, let's go to the question and answer portion. So, our first
Good.
question is from Jocelyn Prades. I am a Filipino teacher, and numeracy skills are part of the subject's competencies like ordering and analyzing. How are we to determine their level in a modular type of teaching? Thank you.
Oh yeah, I believe I was also asked the same question before. Um, it's now we are faced into a modular distance learning. I believe there are only few private schools who have provided either asynchronous or synchronous online learning, but most in the public schools are really gearing towards modular distance learning. And the process on how we provide this our instruction to our learners may really hamper the usual parameters on how we assess our learners or provide instruction at that with our learners. But what we can best do is really uh, create a support system. That's the first thing that you have to do. Create a support system, because you cannot do it with the current onset of the pandemic. You cannot really, as teacher, go to the homes of your students and really assess the skill or teach the skill. But what we can do is provide a support system, a learning support system, a community support system, and be able to communicate with people around the student to help them, provide learning opportunities for our students, like what materials do we need in order for our learners to to learn those essential skills like ordering, classifying, analyzing. These are skills. Okay, these are just not part of cognates. These are skills that we really need to observe. Okay? And so we need parents in order for them to provide, sabi ko nga kanina sa aking presentation, we can do, uh, we can provide learning to our learners, but we need to pave the way. We need to prepare the way, the path, the direction to our learners. In a process, while our students are engaged in self-independent learning through the help of our modules, and as teachers, we need to provide support. What we do is to provide support during consultations, during kamustahan. And at that, if you have the mechanism, the ways on how you can communicate to your learners, then you provide the situation, you provide the arena for our students to really practice that. But let me remind you that this is the time that you really have to take extra effort, because these are students with individual homes, with individual families, and you have to have that extra mile in order for you to touch all those kids and to give attention to all those kids. Okay? You can do synchronous and asynchronous, but it's also essential that you provide one-to-one correspondence, especially in numeracy and literacy.
Thank you so much for that, Doc. And for our next question, we have Chris Kapilayan. What are the learning strategies that could prevent numeracy difficulties?
Okay, so in terms of prevention, I can barely say you cannot prevent numeracy difficulties because there are other variables. There are extraneous factors that contribute to that. Okay, and even if you are a teacher, as a parent, you are a teacher, you cannot do away with abstractions or things that hampers or things that hamper, the continuity of the learning of our students, especially in their foundational age. Whether you like it or not, there are difficulties that could arise. But um, going back to building, building foundational blocks again. Okay, as parent, if you are a parent and you are really from time to time communicating with your children, and if you are a teacher, from time to time you open communication portals for your students to be engaged in different learning experiences, whether real life or online or at different platforms that you have, then that could help, no, direct them towards the goals and aspirations you have in terms of mathematical understanding or conceptual understanding. But you have to do that constantly. Consistency is the key, sabi nga nila, diba? Kasi pag ulitin ko, practice makes perfect, consistency is the key. Kaya nga, di ba, yung mga medyo may kayang mga parents, they send their students to Kumon, they send them to Singaporean maths and Vedic maths practices, because they want to have that consistency. They want to really have that mastery and automaticity. I do not discount the fact that when you provide multiple learning experiences for our learning in terms of giving them practices, drills, this can count. This makes a good difference. But of course, aside from that, you really have to provide them understanding, yung evaluating and creating of the things that they learn around them. Okay, otherwise hindi siya magiging balance. So, alam niya, pero hindi niya iintindihan. So, iyon ay isang importanteng bagay, lalong-lalo na sa numeracy and literacy understanding.
Thank you so much, ma'am. That's all the questions we have for now. Any last reminders to our viewers for today, Doc?
Okay, as last reminder, of course, we are beset with the uncertainty of life, and things are happening around us that are not expected, and we do not know yet when or how it will end. But so long as educators are concerned, we really have to stick to the nobility of our profession, of our calling, and that is being a teacher. And while we are, as I say, beset with this pandemic, we can contribute by being proactive and being innovative, and doing the best that we can in order to pay forward the grace that we are alive, that we are strong, and that we are learning. We have to pay that forward. Thank you very much, Vibal, for having me. And I hope the teachers who are watching will really be inspired and will really be given the information that they need in order to profess what they need to provide for our learners.
Thank you very much, Doc. There we have it. In behalf of VIBAL Group Incorporated, I would like to thank our speaker for today for this very eye-opening and insightful learning session. It is an honor to have you with us today, Doc. And to all our VIBAL viewers, all
Thank you.
thanks to you for your continuous patronage to our daily learning session. Muli, maraming salamat at magandang araw sa ating lahat.